50 cal, lock and load, cut the engines, and take your positions.
Remember this post-apocalyptic action thriller? If you're somebody who rented this movie from Blockbuster, I may have just unlocked a buried memory. The world of Reign of Fire is desolate and unforgiving. Dragons have been uncovered hibernating underneath London and essentially bring about the apocalypse. The menacing beasts are highly evolved prehistoric creatures that lay dormant beneath the surface of the earth for thousands of years. In the beginning of the film, it's explained that the dragons that we once thought were myths concocted by our ancestors had in fact been responsible for wiping out the dinosaurs. With the earth covered in ash, they slept, waiting for their food source to replenish. For millennia, they slumbered deep beneath the surface of the earth until a construction crew awoke the ancient nightmares, releasing them onto our world once again.
Mom, I saw something in there.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. And as voted for by you guys in the latest poll, today we're exploring Reign of Fire. Reign of Fire follows our protagonist, Christian Bale's Quinn, who leads a small community of survivors in Northumberland Castle. Quinn was actually the first person to come into contact with the monsters, and was the lone survivor of the dragon escape from the underground cave. Since then, he's been storing records to make sense of what had happened since that catastrophic day. The community is co-managed by his friend Gerard Butler's Creedy, and the group have managed to plant crops, but were essentially starving, waiting for the next harvest, leading some renegade members to sneak out and pick out some of the fruit. Unfortunately, this alerts a dragon to their location, which attacks them and burns their entire food supply. Soon the castle is met by the Kentucky Irregulars, a paramilitary group of dragon slayers led by Matthew McConaughey's Denton Van Zandt, who arrive on their doorstep with a tank, helicopter, and some soldiers.
Who's in charge?
Zan explains that he developed a system for hunting the dragons after discovering they had poor vision before sunset.
Magic hour.
Though Quinn is initially hesitant to provide them shelter, he assesses their artillery and decides to take a diplomatic approach instead.
Denton Van Zandt.
Together, they're able to collectively kill the dragon that had tormented the castle, before Van explains that the only way to make a difference was to go after the male that was responsible for populating the entire species.
We kill the male. We kill the species.
That male was the lone dragon that had been awakened in the cave, escaping the tunnels to wreak havoc on the city before the planet was overrun by millions of female dragons. The film is quite vague in explaining this, so I've come up with 3 potential possibilities for how the dragon numbers were able to spread so rapidly. The first theory is that the female dragons had also been hibernating and had been awoken by either the sole male dragon through its blaze of destruction, or by the people in their continuous bombing efforts to destroy the beast. The second theory is that the male dragon went around fertilizing eggs that had been laid by female dragons during the prehistoric era. And the last theory is a bit crazy, but hear me out. It's possible that the male dragon is actually the progenitor of the species, capable of creating female offspring that he could then mate with to create more dragons. I'm curious to hear what you guys think, so please let me know some of your ideas below. Now, the fire that the dragons breathe was their primary weapon and was produced in the 2 glands located at the back of their mouths, which, when mixed together, proved to be highly combustible. Though they were creatures driven on instinct, they also displayed a measure of intelligence, which, coupled with their flight and fire-breathing abilities, re-solidified their title as the apex predator on Earth. As they continued to take over and grow into adults, the male began procreating at a rapid pace. This elusive dragon was extremely large, many times the size of his female counterparts. Over time, as their human and animal food sources became scarce, their desperation drove them to cannibalism. Because this was the catalyst that sent them into deep hibernation, I also think that they were a few years away from restarting the very same cycle. After the male dragon is agitated by the Kentucky Irregulars in an attempted attack, it destroys the majority of Zan's men before following their trail back to the castle and wreaking havoc on the unsuspecting community. Fueled in equal parts by the memory of his mother's death and the hatred stemming from the destruction of his people, Quinn follows Zan and Isabella Scorupco's Alex back to London, home to Big Daddy, in a last attempt to destroy him. There are a lot of neat ideas and details present throughout the film, like Quinn and his commune forming a little fire brigade to ward off dragon fire, and since it's a dragon movie set in the future, it's refreshing to see rifles, tanks, and helicopters used against them.
Okay, target 50
The fun is mostly in the action and the effects. I mean, watching Denton Van Zandt jumping down to pierce a dragon with a giant axe, or seeing Quinn taunt a beast with explosive arrows is what it's really all about here. That being said, there's still a decent amount of characterization to be found. Quinn is a charming lead, and you get to see a strong leadership falter as his beliefs on how to deal with the crisis are challenged. Alex is also great, and it's a relief to see a female character in an action movie who isn't there to be a romantic interest, or be lauded about how stunning and brave she is. She's brilliant at her dangerous job, and has one of the coolest moments in the finale. And then there's Denton Van Zandt, who's honestly the best character in the movie. Or any movie, as far as I'm concerned today. Van Zandt is a big dick player alpha, who spends most of his time chewing on cigars and contemplating how to effectively bring the winged demons down. Even saying his name gives you a surge of testosterone that simps would need trend cycles to develop. But Denton isn't into dragon killing for the glory or the honor, or there just to go buck wild with tanks. His purpose is to end the apocalypse, and he's actually quite sensitive, criticizing members of Quinn's commune when they celebrate bringing a dragon down at the cost of lives.
1 dragon down, 3 men dead, oh yeah.
The third act of the movie is gripping, and watching Quinn finally let go of his inhibitions and commit to battling a dragon was a satisfying linchpin we'd been waiting for. Although the movie didn't do as well as planned at the box office, it has an important legacy in the world of film and television. Simply put, without Reign of Fire, CGI dragons would still look really awful today. There really weren't that many dragon movies pre-2002, and the ones we had were limited by the computing power of their time. Even the dragons that appeared in the Dungeons & Dragons movie, released just 2 years prior to Reign of Fire, look pretty awful. And while there's certainly a charm to 1996's Dragon Heart and 1981's Dragon Slayer, those dragons struggled to hold up today. The realm of dark fantasy was sorely lacking when it came to a gritty and terrifying portrayal of dragons. Reign of Fire accomplished something truly unique when it opted to go for a desolate, survivalist movie. Sure, there's still campiness and a B-movie charm, but the dragons are terrifying.
If I can convince you that it's happening, and that happening scares you, I thought that's really interesting.
Making a dragon movie was a ballsy move, and the script for Reign of Fire had already been floating in pre-production limbo for a while. Greg Shabbat and Kevin Paterka had originally sold it in 1996, but it wasn't until Spyglass Pictures took interest that the ball started rolling. Notably, Spyglass didn't take the chance until Dungeons & Dragons and Lord of the Rings had started development. Basically, studios were waiting to see if anyone else would take the risk before taking the plunge themselves. Then of course there was the task of actually creating these foreboding monstrosities. The tone of the film wasn't going to work if the dragons ended up looking like this. All up, the visual effects took about 9 months of prep work. Perhaps the most important element was making the skin texture work to sell the believability of the creatures. There had to be some relatability to the various predators that exist. The skin had to be the same skin as you would find on a king cobra, with a little texturing, let's say from an alligator, director Rob Bowman explained. Their aim was to make the dragon look like it really existed. To this end, the effects team incorporated various animals into their design, from komodos, cobras, lions, to vultures. The VFX studio's Secret Labs took staff trips to the zoo to examine crocodiles and snakes for design research. Bowman also stressed that he wanted the dragons to look graceful, so instead of making a lumbering dinosaur-like rig, the effects team studied videos of leopards stalking their prey and incorporated that type of movement into the animations. Eamon Butler, the CG animation supervisor, said that they initially were going to make the dragons more lizard-like, but found that it didn't look threatening enough. So they reshaped the dragon to keep its neck hunched and added some weathered tears into its wings, giving it a more aged and menacing look. Funnily enough, visual effects supervisor Dan Lee Liu had previously worked on 102 Dalmatians, and the dragon scales were actually modeled by reworking the animations that were used on the Dalmatian fur. The program allowed them to control the size of the scales, and as the skin moved, the scales pulled apart, the gaps separated, and the scales didn't deform or stretch as it did in past dragon animations. In order to create the scenes where the dragon is perched upon Quinn's commune, the team had to digitally recreate the environment. Using a technique called photogrammetry, the art of extracting 3D information from photographs and overlaying them onto digital models, they were able to make it really look like this building was burning down via flames. It's a bit more time consuming to do it this way, sure, but it's also a lot more cost effective than actually burning down an old castle. The practical effects in the movie are pretty great too. In fact, most of the fire is real, not computer animated. The crew would rig up a bulldozer with nozzles and fire hoses to spray out and actually make fire. Of course, the bulldozer needed to be removed in post-production, so it all required a bit of computer magic to tie everything together. The biggest innovation, though, was in the way that the dragons spewed fire on screen. Instead of just emitting flaming breath, the rain of fire dragons are designed to spit out a combination of venomous chemicals that ignite when combined. The crew looked at the ways that cobras spit venom as inspiration for this design, and eventually discovered the bombardier beetles, which spit toxic chemicals from two sacs in their mouths. The exact fire-breathing design was later used in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, then in the 2016 movie Gods of Egypt, and most notably for Daenerys' dragons in the HBO adaptation of Game of Thrones. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. If it weren't for this movie, on-screen dragons would still look pretty awful. Unfortunately, despite all the groundbreaking technical work, the movie couldn't start a fire at the box office. Even sadder is the fact that Secret Lab, the studio that pioneered dragon special effects, had to shut down after Reign of Fire. It's a shame because it really is a ton of fun and the effects hold up super well to this day, especially when we've had stuff like this in the interim. I know it's not the best movie ever made, but it's still hands down one of the best portrayals of dragons in cinema and one of the most creatively influential films of the early 2000s. With that being said, I'd love to know what you thought about the film, so please share this in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Come join our regular streams on Twitch and be a part of the Film Comics Explained public Discord server. Links in the About Me and description below. Well, that's all for today, folks. Niyat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.